Sorry. I'm not a silent protagonist. I'm a noisy one. When you look at video game box art nowadays, what's the most common thing you see? The game's protagonist, looking all serious and in character and shit. Recently I started wondering why so many games have their box arts just be their protagonist looking cool, but it's pretty obvious why. Video game protagonists are recognizable, and they fit right in with the game's vibe, so it is a pretty easy layup. Really artsy box arts have kinda gone away in lieu of what we have now. Le protagoniste looking cooleth. But then, why do some games have their protagonists be almost entirely mute? Back in the day, I could see it. Technical limitations would stop the inclusion of a voiced protagonist, or some devs just didn't even see the need for it yet. But nowadays, why make any protagonist silent when, again, that person on the cover needs to be interesting enough for me to buy the game? Doesn't that seem kinda counterintuitive? I want to talk every kind of silent protagonist. I want to talk how they make games better and how they make games worse. And I want to talk about my experience of thinking all this through like 89 times and what silent protagonists kind of represent to me, as well as what even counts as a silent protagonist. So dim the lights, stand up so you can sit down again, and strap in. It's time for you to feel immersed. It's feel immersed, not immerse shit. In a ton of my favorite games, you'll see the create a character. This is the most common kind of silent protagonist that you will see nowadays, and for good reason. Create a character is, in my opinion, probably the easiest way for you to feel immersed in whatever game you're playing, because usually your create a character is just an extension of you. For me, I try to make like the cooler me. I find it fun to just look for what hair looks the coolest and how perfectly sculpted my jawline should be. It helps with my immersion, actually, because, I mean, how could you be more immersed in a game setting than by being in the game yourself? Admittedly, I am more hesitant about creative characters nowadays because the amount of menus I have now is daunting. And on top of that, I'll do my best to make myself look as goddamn hot as possible, and I still end up taking like 30 minutes in the fucking menu before the game even starts. And I won't even see my character's face half the time because they'll be under a helmet every single time! A lot of newer games start with an accessibility menu, helping you adjust different settings to make your experience more convenient and enjoyable for you. Create a character menus are my accessibility final boss, because holy shit, I can't even access the fucking game I want to play with this thing in my way! How do I make you look pretty? One thing I especially love about creative characters is how no matter what you make, you can always find a reason that they would exist in the game's world. Sometimes, you feel like playing like a god who has no mercy upon their subjects, and so you create Grunkler, Prince of Ristretto, or Alablaster Shams, Mound of Dirt, or worst of all, Larry. But regardless of whatever poor thing you give life to, their inclusion in the game is purely aesthetic and doesn't change how any aspect of the game interacts with you. It's always still down to how you interact with it. It is goddamn hilarious seeing your walking pile of sewage interact with other characters the same way as if it was just you. Your look makes no difference on how other parts of the game interact with you, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing. From an immersed, lore-focused perspective, my first journey through the Lands Between was as cooler me, and I felt so invested in every corner I was exploring. I was making my story as a Tarnished, slowly becoming stronger until eventually I could defeat even the deadliest of foes myself. When I go back again as him, who in the context of the game knows the Lands Between inside and out and can cause earthquakes in the world around him in a matter of hours, and he probably possesses some cosmic knowledge that the human mind can't even begin to unearth, lest he goes mad. But that second playthrough still works in the context of the game's world because you never say anything. That aspect of the game is super limited. Despite the different appearance or manufactured backstory I make up, he is just the same as me. Dialogue options can have a different context behind them depending on who you are, but it doesn't matter if you said yes because you're invested in the conversation, or if you're a master manipulator just orchestrating conversations to yield the desired outcome you want, the end result is still the same. Again, that's both good and bad for immersion. That's just one example, but it extends to more. How your character interacts with the game is not at all dictated by how they look. If I was in this world, wouldn't it just be kind of insane to stare at this thing in the face and be totally cool with it? And furthermore, most of these created characters have some kind of voice attached to them, but it's normally just like grunts and yells. Sometimes the voice doesn't match the face, and it's funny as hell, but not what I would think of when I think immersion. And if I had a stick up my ass and wanted to cause problems, technically they aren't even silent. So if creative characters have a sort of built-in detachment in immersion, why do I still feel like they represent it? The answer is their expression. The fact that whatever you created, whether it be the cooler you, Plivis the Demolisher, or just a pre-made choice that you didn't really care about, you still made that choice to have them look like that. To me, it reflects what kind of person you are seen in the game. If you made a thing that looks just so dumb, it makes you laugh. If you make the cooler you like the idea of being dropped into this world yourself. If you made nothing, then you just want to play the game for the gameplay. And if you made him, well, you suffer from night terrors and can only describe what you see in the dark shades of your room through the lens of a video game. Who you make is an expression of you, the player. I feel like that really makes you connect with your little scrunkly subconsciously. You know, maybe Neil Druckmann was onto something when he said you feel an inherent empathy for the person you play as, just, you know, not for his game. No matter what your character looks like, it's something you made, and you control as an avatar. So I always feel that innate connection to the game world around me, and I can honestly forget a lot of the artificiality of the games I'm playing. Even if I wear a helmet the whole time, under there, I still never forget that it's me. So even though I sometimes get made fun of for taking 80 years to make my character look as hot as possible, and sometimes I wonder why I even go through the effort of wasting that much time, and sometimes there's too many fucking settings with the menus nowadays, I'm still gonna make cooler me, because god damn it, that's who I want to be. One thing to remember though, that pretty much all creative characters lack, and most silent protagonists for that matter, is having any character at all. Character, you missed your cue! There you go, you dick. As you could imagine, a character that doesn't speak probably isn't the most compelling conversation partner. Imagine putting yourself in a room with Gordon Freeman and Kratos. I guarantee you'll get a lot more out of talking with Kratos than "I'm with the science team" over there. Inherently, speaking protagonists have a hell of a lot more character than silent ones, because they actually talk to other characters outside of you just doing things as a player. Compare older Call of Duty games to newer ones. In older games, you'd get such lines as, "Ramirez! Take your team and secure the burger town." In newer CODs, though, Ramirez would probably say something back, because that's how communication works. It's honestly more shocking when a protagonist is silent than when they're speaking nowadays, especially in AAA games. When characters kind of talk around you in these big budget games, my brain isn't kind of in the game yet immediately. I'm not really immersed. Instead, I always think, why am I silent compared to everyone else? Is there a story reason for that? Or are you just lazy? That's not to say that speaking protagonists beat silent protagonists in the character department every time. Some of my favorite protagonists are silent, and it's not even from lack of character. The issue comes from the quality of the writing. Sure, speaking protagonists talk to other characters and deepen our understanding of who we're with in these games, but it's always going to be dependent on if the writing is worth a damn. Some protagonists are very strong in terms of their writing. They're so compelling that watching them do basically anything is engaging enough for a story. And some protagonists have completely serviceable, but forgettable presences that half the time you forgot you were playing as them. And that's not even to say that these games are bad. No, I fucking love Dying Light, and I love Infamous. It's just, whenever they come up in conversation, I'm not really racing to scream about Kyle Crane or Delson Rowe. These games excel in terms of gameplay, and protagonists don't really matter at all when it comes to that. So in my mind, it's kind of a net neutral. It's not really hurting my ears whenever they talk, but it's not doing the game or really the story any favors. And then there's the bad protagonists. There's the ones you want to see die within the first 10 minutes of the game bad. These ones actively hurt the game you're playing, and there are so many ways that they can do this. They can be just annoying, like Life is Strange. They can be dull and so far up their own ass, like with Watch Dogs. They can single-handedly ruin the marketing for a game, like with Forspoken. Or they can cause me to go down so many mental rabbit holes and make me stop seeing the game as a game and more as a tool for whatever the writers want me to think, like with Abby in The Last of Us Part 2. There are so many more examples. Their writing can be abysmal. The voice acting could be bad, or maybe the focus of the story just isn't on the protagonist at a certain point, and so we kind of just need to drag our feet along with them to the end. A bad voiced protagonist pulls you out of a game more than a silent one ever could. A good voiced protagonist, I'd say, pulls you further in, and a mid one can kind of go either way or nowhere at all. Regardless of their quality, though, voiced protagonists have more character than silent ones. Most of the time. Some games utilize their protagonist's silence in very clever ways to deliver an even more lasting impression than if they spoke dialogue. Ori and the Will of the Wisps has Ori communicate exclusively through body language, and it makes my heart ache whenever I see Ori give Ku a hug. No words need to be spoken for some of this game's most powerful scenes. After all, actions do speak louder. The game never needs to have someone say, "I love you," because you can see it. You can feel it. You feel so connected to Ori through their kindness alone, and I think that's really special. I don't even think a game would work like this with a voice protagonist. I think it would totally clash with its presentation. I miss Ori, man. I really gotta replay it sometime. Hollow Knight. Oh. You play as the Knight, a thing that is specifically unfeeling and emotionless. It never says anything, it never hints to emotion, it never reacts to dialogue, nothing. And it's so fucking cool! It's explained much later in the game what the deal is with the Knight, but basically it was purposefully created with a lack of emotion in mind. It was made with void, and its seemingly inhuman traits were exactly what was sought after by the monarch of Hallownest. In a vain attempt to delay the fall of his kingdom, the Pale King committed many atrocities, and you are technically one of them. I could yap about Hollow Knight lore for hours. I could yap about Hollow Knight the game for weeks. But to keep it brief, the deeper you dig into your past, the Knight's past, the more you learn, and the more you feel rewarded for doing so. I've never seen a literal, emotionless, faceless husk turn out to be debatably the most interesting thing about a game's narrative. There are a few other examples, but I hope I at least made this point clear. Your protagonist doesn't need to speak to be memorable, to be a great character. You could be so creative with what your silent protagonist does or is, and there are so many ways that can make for a better story. It's so fucking cool. Wait, what the fuck? You were early that time! Now, protagonists are supposed to be the things that really keep the story moving, right? Whether through their goals, ambitions, or lack thereof, their motivations are in conflict with the antagonists, and that's what makes for interesting stories. If someone somewhere was just like, I feel like becoming the ruler of this kingdom, and nobody else was like, dude, what the fuck, you can't just do that. It'd be boring as hell. Seeing protagonists overcome obstacles. That's that good shit. Beating personal demons or physical challenges is incredibly inspiring to me. Even more so when the challenges they face are something that I could have no hope of beating if I was in that scenario. Tears of the Kingdom is my personal favorite Zelda game. I know, that's a hot take. The story made me feel something when I played it. Link must gather the help of the sages of Hyrule in order to defeat Ganon, but you actually get to know the sages as you go. Tulin, my beloved. Each of them have their own story segments and assist Link in gameplay, and while their inclusion wasn't the most graceful, admittedly, I still ended up liking each of these characters in their own right. The idea of assembling a team of really powerful allies to beat an even more powerful enemy is so fucking cool to me. When it says a sage's power cannot reach you here, you know you're in some deep shit. The way the music swells as you descend further, the Demon King's army, the Demon King himself, the Demon King becoming the Demon Dragon, God! The presentation had me so gripped all the way through. And that isn't even talking about Zelda herself. Like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom has memories you can examine throughout the world to discover a completely separate story that focuses on Zelda. I remember when I was searching for each of these glyphs, I went out of my way to do them in order, and I was just so invested in each of them. As I progressed further and further along, nearing the end of these memories, I remember unlocking the last memory, and as I was on my way to complete it, a sort of sinking feeling crept in. A realization of what had become of Zelda, but one that I refused to acknowledge. As I watched that final memory, and my fears were realized, I closed my eyes and sat in that sadness. Then, calling from the sky, the cry of the dragon that Zelda had become. And in that moment, when Link looked up at the sky, I had never felt so connected to him. I felt sad, yes, but there was a look of determination on his face. Something that subconsciously communicated, I am going to save you. And in that moment, I dusted myself off and I got back to work. That moment alone is why Tears of the Kingdom is my favorite Zelda game. It helped me steady myself again after learning of a terrible tragedy. This video game helped teach me one of the morals I stand by every day. We can sit in the sadness of our lives, and we can talk about it all we like. But what are we gonna do about it? Lies of P is not an easy game, but my god, is it one of the prettiest things I have ever played. I know when you first look at this game, pretty is probably not the word you'd use, but if you've played the game, then you know what I mean. P, your character, is a puppet slowly learning what it means to be human, and the way to do that? To lie. Nothing is more human than lying, says Lies of P. And damn, Lies of P is spitting right now. The game is a Souls-like, a brutally difficult experience that is meant to be as grueling and challenging as they come. Greater the difficulty, greater the satisfaction. Though this game isn't your average Souls-like, at least to me. While this is easily one of the hardest games I have ever played, there's so much more to Lies of P than the boss fights or the absurdly long levels. This game is an absolute fucking vibe, especially with the DLC. When you peel back the layers of this game, you really start to see a genuinely fantastic story and an utterly unmatched presentation. Throughout the game, you're given chances to either tell other people the truth, no matter how difficult it may be, or to lie to them, usually to soften the blow. Whenever you lie, you feel your gears shifting. Then the ergo starts to whisper within you. Then you feel warmth, until soon your heart is pounding. The more you lie, the more you defy what it means to be a puppet, the more human you become. The more you listen to music, the more you start to enjoy it. And that is to say, holy shit, the music in this game deserves so many awards. Becoming human leads to the best ending of the game, and it feels so good to see it. What Lies of P does to make you achieve this ending is really take your time. That, to me, is the overarching point that the devs try to make you see. This is what really makes the game special. You should stop and really listen to the music playing. You'll really enjoy it more that way. You should be kind to the people you meet. The world is cruel enough as is. And that extends to even more things. Environments are so carefully crafted, and each of them tells so many stories with so little. Pay attention. Seek out the little things, and you're bound to be rewarded. Sometimes that reward isn't even an actual reward, so to speak, but it's merely the satisfaction of finding it, or piecing a mystery together on your own. Lies of P is a special Souls-like, because the satisfaction isn't restricted to just the gameplay and the boss fights, but it extends out to the music, the world, and the characters around you. All the while, P changes as you grow more human. The standout moments of this game physically change the look of P to reflect his growth into a real boy. Eventually, he'll start making little grunt sounds as he moves and attacks, another sign of his humanity. Most of all, this motherfucker is a master of aura farming, the most human thing you could do. I see all of this slow progression into a human, and I'm so invested in P. While P learns to become human, I learn to relish being one. There's so much to look at here, so much to love, and not all of it is immediately obvious. This game taught me to appreciate more of the smaller things. Always peek behind the curtain, because there are so many joys just waiting to be discovered. Deltarune's protagonist is Chris, a character who you don't even really think is a character until the end of its first chapter. Chris has become one of my favorite characters in recent memory, not because of what we see them do, but actually because of what we don't see them do. There's a distinct difference between us and them. Chris acts outside of our actions, often in direct opposition to them. It seems like Chris is trying to keep some handle on their life, but only whenever we aren't looking. This kind of relationship between me as a player and Chris as a character kind of feels like how I would act around a disobedient dog. I'm the owner, so to speak, so whatever I say the dog Chris should do goes. Say you want to invite Birdley to the festival, even if you really don't want to. Sing the wrong number song, even though that would be fucking insane. Say, bangin' sermon, my man. And every time Chris does something in the downtimes between chapters, when we find out about it, I react like an owner saw their dog dig into their treat bag while they were at work. It's like, did you slash those tires, Chris? Did you confide your secrets with Noelle? Bad dog. Maybe that's just me, but I've never felt a relationship with a protagonist like this before. Chris is basically a vessel for us to pilot when we play Deltarune, only they're fully conscious while we do it. We can make them do things that they would never do otherwise, and that thought is legitimately fucking terrifying. Could you imagine being a passenger in your own body as someone steals your voice, your actions, your movements, and you just have to watch it happen? I feel almost guilty playing Deltarune, because while we certainly do some good as we play, I still feel like I'm hijacking this poor person's life as I do it. And worse yet, I care more about seeing this story through to its end than I do about ruining these characters' lives. I really want to see how the weird route progresses, even though I've most certainly manipulated a lost girl to do it. Because it's just a game, and these characters aren't real, so I'm not hurting anybody, actually. It's just a game, so I can see how good and how bad things get without fear of lasting consequences. But that's not entirely true. To me, I see a lot of parallels with these characters and real life. It's how I view basically every game. While the objective part of me sees these as pixels and lines of dialogue, the subjective part of me sees something to take with me into my real life. There's always something to learn or take away from these games and their stories. Tears of the Kingdom reminded me of my stance on loyalty and sacrifice, what lengths you would go to for the people you love, and how it's okay to rely on your friends. No journey should be dealt with entirely alone. Lies of P taught me to endure in the face of overwhelming odds and to stop and look around every so often. There's so much beauty in the world if you just stop for a second, and that beauty can come in many forms. Don't get swept up in one thing. Perceptiveness is always rewarded. And Deltarune showed me that everyone has a story, even if that's shockingly easy to forget or completely miss. Empathy is perhaps the most needed and most overlooked thing we need. It's through empathy that we can make a difference for the people around us, even if our fate seems inevitable. These moments on the way to our destination matter just as much as the end itself. There's always something to be learned from these stories, always something to take from them. That's why I love these games. Their protagonists always talk through actions, but their actions mean so many different things. Link is a stalwart hero who stands in opposition to an overwhelming evil. P is discovering what it means to be human in a world on the brink of collapse, and Chris is a vessel watching us take over their life and relationships for them. Despite their shared silence, none of these characters are even remotely the same. None of their stories are remotely the same. I think it really shows you can make silent protagonists mean something, mean anything, really. Sky's the limit with these guys. It's just the way you do it that changes. The way you do it depends entirely on your focus. There we go. See how seamless that was? Do that more. What the fuck? You can make a game about damn near anything, and I feel so blessed to live in a time where there are so many different games made by so many different people. You know how there are some games that really make you stop and think, holy shit, I'm playing art. That's indie games to me. I am really glad that indie games have taken off so much in the last few years. There's bound to be a ton more creativity and different stories contained within them than in the AAA scene. What I like especially about indie games is how even if they sometimes lack an extremely fine polish like AAA games, or not, they more often than not highlight one specific feeling that sticks with you throughout the game. No type of game hones in on a single theme or feeling better than indie games. Visual novels and RPG Maker games are the best examples of this. Games with comparatively lacking visual elements, but they don't even need that to leave a powerful and memorable experience. Perhaps the most infamous visual novel is Doki Doki Literature Club, a game that kind of fucks with the idea of being a game and breaks the fourth wall a lot. This game exploded when I was all the way back in middle school, which... Jesus Christ. Despite its relatively few backgrounds and character sprites, this game has stuck with me for years, based purely off of a few key CGs and exceptional writing. Only one problem. The protagonist isn't silent, and that's not what we're talking about! You're getting off track! Focus! 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 Blood Money is a more recent example, and damn, is this game just kinda sad. Developed by Shroomy Christ. Great name. The premise is that you need $25,000 for a surgery, but you obviously don't have a good way of getting that much. Until you see a stall on the side of the road. A man is offering $1 per click, so, of course, you stop by and start horribly maiming and brutalizing this poor guy. It's not written on the box, but the more you hurt him, the more money he gives you. It is incredibly simple, with the only things in the game being Harvey's stall, Harvey's shop, and Harvey himself. Played by Dexter Manning, my beloved.
Stop that! Nah, just kidding. Keep going.
As you hurt him more and more, Harvey begs you to stop, screaming at the pain you inflict him and insulting you out of anger. He calls out you, the player, safe behind the screen and free from consequences. It's really disheartening when you hit a new milestone and open up the shop to see an even more deadly weapon than the last. That made my stomach sink more than anything. Seeing a new weapon and going, oh god, before Harvey himself sees it and he goes, oh god, before resuming his torture. The game is less about you and more about him, a good Samaritan who unfortunately ran into you. Your character has no lines because the game isn't about your character. It's about how you, the player, are hurting poor Harvey. If our protagonist had spoken literally anything at all, I think it would pull me right out of feeling responsible for Harvey's suffering. Sometimes your game doesn't need a protagonist at all. All that matters in this game is Harvey and you, and because the focus of this game was purely on that, I walked away from it a lot more satisfied. Midnight Train is an RPG Maker game developed by Lydia Bluebell and is a personal favorite of mine. In it, you play as a different kind of silent protagonist, in that Luna Leyndell is mute. Despite never talking, Luna is full of personality, charm, and character. She communicates through sign language and handwritten notes, and even these only do more for her place as a genuine protagonist. Luna's a quiet protagonist, but not a silent one. More to the point, her place in the game really adds to how magical of an experience it is. Together with her partner, Neil, she'll have to navigate dangerous areas, meet new strangers, and escape this mysterious place, all while a clock slowly ticks down on her imprisonment. Unlike most every other silent protagonist, Luna's silence is actually one of the focal points of this game, and it deepens your understanding of her a lot. I've never really seen a game pull this off so well, all while completely gripping me with its different characters and story. I honestly don't want to talk too much about it because I would highly recommend you experience it yourself. Nightreign is free to play on Lydia's itch.io page, which is also linked in the description. The same goes for all the indie games I'm mentioning here, by the way. The description is so cool. Ooh, you want to check it out so bad. Ooh. But I guess the point I want to make here is that visual fidelity and stunning graphics are not required to make a standout scene or have stellar art direction. I think that various visual novels and RPG Maker games really prove that you can avoid certain presentation aspects of games and leave them up to player interpretation and still walk away with a game that leaves a strong impression. Sometimes you don't need that mirror sheen polish. Sometimes we don't need to see everything, you know? And speaking of not seeing everything... What? What the fuck? What? Where? What? Where the fuck am I? Hello? Huh? This is Blueprints, a puzzle game developed by Dogubom, where you need to explore a mansion of constantly changing rooms to find a mysterious 49th room that isn't in the floor plans. This game sunk its fucking claws into me twice, and good lord, it is so fun! I'm gonna be very selective with the footage I show of this game because I would hate to be the bitch that spoils one of this game's many puzzles for you. There are so many different branches of puzzles to follow, lore to discover, secrets hidden in plain sight. It is so wildly satisfying to me when I finally drop that last puzzle piece into place and I can finally move on to the next one. You'll notice that this game is in first person, even though you play as a named character. And while there are a few cutscenes with you, the heir to the mansion, you really don't matter much at all in the grand scheme of the game. You don't play the puzzle game for the random blonde kid with all those ashy-ass hands and those raggedy-ass shoes. You play it for the puzzles. In this way, I think the first-person camera is a much better choice overall, because you literally can't see yourself ever. Instead, your focus is solely on the environment, which room connects to where, and how to piece it all together. Because when you play Blueprints, that's what matters. Focus on the puzzles, not on how this fuck-ass kid walks. Portal 2 has a similar focus on puzzle solving, but sprinkle in a bit of comedy and character in this magical pie. Shell, much like every other silent protagonist, doesn't say anything. Woo! She hardly takes up any part of the game at all, except for
Adopted, fatty, no hair.
she gets yapped to all of the time, but never comments on the utter absurdity of the supercomputer genius and the moron right next to her. You never see Shell outside of your own Portal shenanigans, and I think it also contributes to what the game wants you to focus on. Similar to Blueprints, the environment, and in this case, other characters, are what the game wants you to look at. Given that you do that through Shell's eyes, you don't get distracted from that. Conversely, take a game like Inside. Your boy is perfectly visible, and it's through seeing the boy that you can directly contrast him with the world around him. His red shirt, his human-like animations versus the rest of the world, in its dreary gray and almost robotic civilization. That contrast alone is compelling enough, but the fact that you can see it, the boy versus the world, draws attention to it. It, in some small part, demands your focus. The same goes for other games we've mentioned earlier in this video. I think it's so cool that even something as seemingly innocuous as the camera perspective matters a ton when it comes to what you want to focus on. I feel like horror games especially really capitalize on a game's focus. Immersing you in a game world to scare the hell out of you is really hard, but there are a lot of great games to pull from. Isaac Clarke in Dead Space is a pretty clear-cut winner. The only times you ever hear him is when he's screaming horribly while being brutally murdered. Shit's fucking terrifying. The same goes for Miles Upshur from Outlast, and actually, I'm gonna go on a little tangent here. I think this is one of the most clear-cut examples of a silent protagonist benefiting a game over a voiced one. Miles from Outlast 1 is a silent protagonist, except for his screams, but also his notes that he writes down. His notes are full of personality and honestly a ton of fun to read. They had the vibe that Outlast nails perfectly, of a horrifying situation with like a tinge of comedy sprinkled in. Miles is a character only if you read his notes, and it makes the ending of the game all the more tragic if you did. Compared to Outlast 2's Blake, who is not as great. Blake Langerman is a voiced protagonist, and his character bogged down the majority of the game's story for me, honestly. Not to say he isn't voiced exceptionally well, but I feel his inclusion in the game just wasn't really graceful. A lot of the horror was cut back because Blake would say a really shitty line or just say "fuck" 89 times, which is my line, not yours. It's unfortunate too, because Outlast 2 definitely has some standout moments and great scares, but the nagging of the protagonist actually pulled me out of the game more and soured the game as a whole for me. I could say the same for games like FNAF, where the silence of the protagonist allows you to focus on the situation more, but in later games like Security Breach, I low-key hate Gregory every time he talks. But there's also times where a voiced protagonist would be so much better than the silent one we got. Easiest example, Poppy Playtime Chapter 4. There's this legitimately hilarious scene near the end of that chapter where Poppy's like having a mental breakdown and asks your character like so many questions and you just don't do anything about it. It's really funny. It also completely sucks for a horror game. And breaking away from the horror genre now, there's a bunch of games where a voiced protagonist would have been so much better. Sometimes it's weird as hell when people just kind of say things to you and you're met with and then just move on. There are a lot more examples I could prattle off here, games with and without silent protagonists, but basically what I'm saying is that a bunch of things can kind of shift your focus in a game, from what type of game you're playing, to what the developer's intention is, to even what the camera perspective is. It's really cool how a protagonist's silence can either draw your attention to that silence, or lead you somewhere else entirely. I didn't even say anything that time. I give up. Video games are my favorite form of art ever because of one simple reason. Interactivity. And like a billion other reasons, but mostly that one. Games are so special because you can interact with them, which no other form of art has really been able to replicate. Paintings, novels, movies, none of them could match up to actually moving in that world by my own will. And it's because you can poke and prod around a game that you feel this inherent curiosity. What would happen if I mess with the game like this? What's gonna happen next in the story? What are the consequences of making this choice? What's the deeper lore of this game? Games wrap you around their finger just by the sheer volume of things to be curious about. They far exceed anything I've seen in TV shows or anything else. Now, how does that curiosity extend to silent protagonists? As I'm sure you've noticed by now, I've kinda not been talking about silent protagonists for a while now. I've also been loosely adapting what a silent protagonist is basically this whole video. Alright, let's finally bring it up. What defines a silent protagonist? The hard part about this is that there's this big gray area of what makes a silent protagonist, with a bunch of technicalities that you could slap on that make them not truly silent. Create a character is usually tied with a voice you select, where they often don't say anything, but they make and noises. Some games have you select dialogue, even though your character doesn't say anything audibly. Technically, that makes these protagonists' voice, but I say fuck that. I think the big things that make a protagonist silent when it's in that gray area are when there is spoken dialogue between them and someone else, and or, yes, maybe both, when the focus of the story isn't on them. To me, Link is a silent protagonist, even though he talks when we choose a dialogue box. To me, my Tarnished is a silent protagonist, even though it's mostly the same, grunts and dialogue boxes. I think the intention with these kinds of protagonists, ones that are only kinda silent, is to have it both ways. One, in the game world, so that they're not a completely silent weirdo that can't interact with anyone, and two, for the game as a whole, to still reap the benefits that silent protagonists bring to games. Basically, everything I brought up in the last few sections of this video. Have you been paying attention? For me, silent protagonists represent an older style of games, one where developers didn't have to think about lore or story or character or whatever other bullshit for the dude you play as, and instead could just focus on making a fun game. What silent protagonists are, more than anything, is curiosity. The silent protagonists of before facilitated players to focus on the gameplay and the world around them, to be curious about the game itself. Back then, the focus of many games were hardly ever on who we were playing as. Nowadays, people have reused the same idea of a silent protagonist in new ways that allow for more depth in the games we play. The silent protagonists of today allow for even more curiosity than before. Some games have their silent protagonist be a central component to the story now. Some games emphasize the silent protagonist's character in a world, and some games have the focus be on that silent protagonist and their actions, but all of them assist with immersion and curiosity. It's just that now, we have a wider range for feeling immersed and curious than before, and we can feel those things in multiple ways now. And isn't that just so fucking cool? Silent protagonists used to be a restriction on games. They used to be this thing that developers had to work around in order to make a game fun, and oftentimes they would be neglected entirely just to make a fun game. And honestly, that's so okay. I know I've harped on and on and on about silent protagonists being important to games we play and how they fit into a world or a story or whatever, but the fact of the matter is that some games just don't need to divert any attention to a protagonist at all. Sometimes there isn't a protagonist, or sometimes the protagonist just doesn't fucking matter at all, and that is perfectly fine. But the thing I really want to make clear here is how I find it really fucking cool that this thing that was initially a restriction has grown and blossomed into this interesting, multi-layered, dense, and beautiful aspect of only some of the games we play. I think it reflects how creative games have gotten as time has gone on, how many different games there are out there. Video games are the best form of art because they have only gotten better with time, and will only continue to get better with time, because they have taken what was once a restriction and repurposed it to tell new stories, because they reflect, in the purest form, creative visions come to life, and because every game now has the worst monetization scheme ever. But I want to talk about the good parts of games mostly. Making this video has really reminded me why I love video games so much. I initially wanted this to be a video somewhere in the realm of like 20 minutes, but that didn't happen. My scope was so much smaller when I first came up with this idea and started writing the script for it, but the more I looked into it, the more I really resonated with all of the games I was writing about. Making a video on a game forces you to interact with it in a totally new way, and it's honestly really fucking fun. It left me with a deeper appreciation of all of the games I've played. And sure, now this conclusion has gone off the rails and I'm hardly even talking about silent protagonists anymore, but I think that's also kind of the point. I ordered this video with immersion first, because that's what I believed was the biggest strength of silent protagonists. I thought about how a silent protagonist can work the way I initially expected, by not taking up a bunch of screen presence to help players focus on what the game was really about. But then I thought about it some more, and I realized that a sense of immersion could be achieved in a ton of different ways, even through just one type of protagonist. And then I thought about it some more, and I realized that silent protagonists are really fucking good at making me curious. They always make me ask questions, make me wonder, why are you silent? And is there a plot reason for you being silent? Before I knew it, I stopped thinking about silent protagonists themselves and more about the processes behind them, how they worked, their causes and effects, and what ways you could be creative with them. And that's why I put curiosity last in the order, because it was the last thing I really realized. Silent protagonists made me curious about more than just themselves. They made me curious about the games they're in as a whole. What I can see when I play and what I can't see. The process of coming up with ideas and translating them into game form. What intentions worked and which ones didn't. Silent protagonists were a gateway drug for me to dive headfirst into the pit of games overall. And then I thought about it some more. And I realized I wasn't even thinking about silent protagonists at all anymore. How powerful is that? To think of one small part of even one game and to expand upon it and derive new meaning from it. To dive into only one topic, only to be led into a vast ocean of so many more. When I realized I wasn't even thinking of silent protagonists anymore, all I could think about was, this is why video games are the best art form. This is why I have such fond memories of growing up on video games. Nothing else could make me feel this much from something that doesn't say anything at all. Silent protagonists. Hell of a thing, ain't it? I've never made a video like this before, but the process of making it was so damn fun. I'd really like to make more. I think if I make another video like this, it'll be about just one game, so give me some suggestions. Tell me what you thought of the video, anything that could be changed or improved for next time, or if I did a good job.
Please tell me I did a good job.
Be sure to check out the description to support the indie games featured in this video. Anyways, I'll leave you there. Be kind, be respectful, don't say slurs, and take it easy, eh?